In the depths of time, in an age so ancient that it predates the rise and fall of civilizations, there existed an order of guardians whose sole purpose was to preserve a prophecy, to protect a knowledge, to ensure that a message would survive the ravages of time and reach those who would come in the final days. These guardians were known as the Serpent Sbilas, a name that translates as the keepers of the sacred fire, or the protectors of the dragon's wisdom. They were not warriors in the conventional sense, though they possessed great power. They were not priests or priestesses in the institutional sense, though they were deeply spiritual. They were something far more ancient and far more essential. They were the living embodiment of a prophecy, the walking vessels of a message that had been entrusted to them at the very beginning of human consciousness. The prophecy that the Serpent Sbilas was sworn to protect was the prophecy of the Dragon Queen, the prophecy of the return of the feminine divine in its most powerful and most transformative form. This prophecy spoke of a time far in the future when the world would be in crisis, when humanity would be on the brink of destruction, when the balance between the masculine and feminine principles would have been so thoroughly disrupted that the very survival of consciousness itself would be in question. And in that moment of greatest darkness and greatest danger, the Dragon Queen would awaken, would rise from her long sleep, would reclaim her throne, and would guide humanity toward a new understanding, a new way of being, a new world based on balance, harmony, and the honoring of all life. The Serpent Sbilas understood that this prophecy was not a prediction of a distant future, but a blueprint for transformation, a map of consciousness that would guide those who were ready to receive it. They understood that their role was not to make the prophecy happen, but to preserve it, to protect it, to ensure that when the time came, when the conditions were right, the knowledge would be available to those who needed it most. And so, at the very beginning of recorded history, the Serpent Sbilas established themselves in the hidden places of the world. They created networks of guardians, individuals who were trained in the deepest mysteries, who understood the nature of the prophecy, who were committed to its preservation and its eventual revelation. They established temples and sacred sites, places where the knowledge could be preserved, where initiates could be trained, where the frequency of the Dragon Queen's consciousness could be maintained and transmitted. The Serpent Sbilas were not a single order, but a vast network of interconnected communities scattered across the world, in different cultures and different civilizations, but all united by a common purpose, all connected by a common thread of consciousness. They worked in secret, hidden from the view of those who sought to suppress the knowledge, protected by the very secrecy that surrounded them. In ancient Egypt, the Serpent Sbilas worked through the mystery schools, encoding the prophecy into the symbols and the sacred geometry of the temples. In ancient India, they worked through the yoga traditions, preserving the knowledge of the Kundalini energy, the sacred fire that was the manifestation of the Dragon Queen's power. In ancient China, they worked through the Taoist traditions, maintaining the balance between yin and yang, the feminine and masculine principles. In the indigenous cultures of the Americas and Africa and Australia, they worked through the oral traditions, preserving the knowledge in stories and songs and ceremonies that had been passed down from generation to generation. The Serpent Sbilas understood that the prophecy could not be preserved through words alone, could not be maintained through texts that could be burned or destroyed. And so they encoded it into the very structure of human consciousness, into the DNA of the human species, into the collective memory of humanity. They created initiations and rituals that would awaken the knowledge in those who were ready to receive it. They created art and music and poetry that would speak to the deepest levels of consciousness. They created a living tradition that would survive any attempt to suppress it, that would continue to flow through human civilization like an underground river, nourishing those who drank from it, connecting all those who were part of the great work of transformation. The story of the Serpent Sbilas in the modern world begins with a woman named Serpent, a name that was both literal and symbolic, a name that indicated her role as a keeper of the ancient knowledge. Serpent was a descendant of the Sbilas lineage, a woman who had been trained since childhood in the mysteries, who understood her role in the great work of preservation and revelation. Serpent's awakening to her true purpose came through a series of dreams that began when she was a young woman. In these dreams, she found herself in vast underground chambers, in temples that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously, in the presence of beings of immense power and wisdom. These beings identified themselves as the Serpent Sbilas, as the guardians of the prophecy, as the keepers of the Dragon Queen's wisdom. "You have been called," they said to her in the language of consciousness that transcends words. "You have been chosen because you carry within you the blood of the guardians, because you have the capacity to understand what others cannot perceive, because you are willing to pay the price that understanding demands. The time has come for the prophecy to be revealed. The time has come for the Dragon Queen to awaken, and you have been prepared your entire life for this moment." Serpent spent the following years in deep study and practice, learning the mysteries that had been preserved by the Sbilas, understanding the nature of the prophecy, preparing herself to be a vessel through which the knowledge could flow into the world. She traveled to sacred sites around the world, to the temples and the caves and the hidden places where the Serpent Sbilas had left their mark. She studied with teachers who were themselves part of the ancient lineage, who understood the prophecy and who were committed to its revelation. And as she deepened her understanding, she began to perceive something that most people could not perceive. She began to see the network of guardians that spanned the globe, the invisible connections that linked all those who were part of the great work. She began to understand that the Serpent Sbilas were not just a historical order from the distant past, but a living presence, a consciousness that continued to work through the world, that was actively guiding the awakening of humanity toward the fulfillment of the prophecy. She discovered that the prophecy of the Dragon Queen was not a single prophecy, but a series of interconnected prophecies, each one revealing a different aspect of the great transformation that was unfolding. She discovered that the prophecy spoke of 7 stages of awakening, 7 levels of consciousness that humanity would need to traverse in order to fully embody the wisdom of the Dragon Queen. The first stage was the stage of awakening, the moment when individuals began to recognize that something was wrong with the world as it had been presented to them, when they began to question the narratives they had been taught, when they began to seek truth beyond the official stories. The second stage was the stage of remembering, the moment when individuals began to recall the knowledge that had been hidden, to access the memories that were encoded in their DNA, to connect with the wisdom that had been preserved by the Serpent Sbilas. The third stage was the stage of integration, the moment when individuals began to integrate the knowledge they had recovered, to understand how it applied to their own lives, to begin to embody the principles of the Dragon Queen's wisdom. The fourth stage was the stage of activation, the moment when individuals began to actively work with the energy of the Dragon Queen, to awaken the Kundalini fire within themselves, to begin to transform their consciousness and their being. The fifth stage was the stage of transmission, the moment when individuals began to share the knowledge with others, to become teachers and healers and guides, to help others awaken to the truth. The sixth stage was the stage of manifestation, the moment when the knowledge began to manifest in the external world, when the structures of society began to shift, when the old order began to crumble and the new world began to be born. And the seventh stage was the stage of completion, the moment when the prophecy would be fully fulfilled, when the Dragon Queen would be fully awakened in human consciousness, when the balance between the masculine and feminine would be fully restored, when humanity would finally understand its true nature and its true purpose. If you want a practical, step-by-step explanation of the path of knowledge we're exploring here today, I've created a complete guide to help you apply it in your own life. You'll find the link in the description. And tell us in the comments where you are watching from. We would love to know. Serpent understood that she was living in the midst of these stages of awakening, that humanity was in the process of moving from the stage of awakening into the stage of remembering, that the great work of transformation was accelerating, that the time of revelation was upon them. And she made a commitment to dedicate her life to helping others understand the prophecy, to become a voice for the Serpent Sbilas, to help guide humanity through the remaining stages of awakening. She began to teach, to share the knowledge with those who were ready to hear it. She wrote books that were published under various names. She created art and music that encoded the ancient wisdom. She gave lectures and workshops to those who were hungry for this knowledge. She worked with other guardians who had also been awakened to their role, who understood that they too were part of the Serpent Sbilas lineage, who were committed to the revelation of the prophecy. But as Serpent's work became more widely known, she began to encounter resistance. There were those who saw her work as a threat, who feared that the revelation of the prophecy would undermine their power and their control. There were institutions that tried to suppress her message, to prevent her from reaching those who were ready to hear. And there were more subtle forms of resistance as well. Serpent began to experience strange phenomena, synchronicities that seemed designed to test her commitment, challenges that appeared to be obstacles, but which were actually initiations, opportunities to deepen her understanding and her faith in the prophecy. But Serpent understood that this resistance was itself part of the prophecy, that the forces of the old order would inevitably rise up to oppose the awakening of the Dragon Queen, that this opposition was a sign that the prophecy was indeed unfolding as it had been foretold. And so she continued her work, continued to teach, continued to help others awaken to the truth. She discovered that there were far more guardians, far more members of the Serpent Sbilas lineage than she had initially realized. She found them in every walk of life, in every culture, in every part of the world. Some were conscious of their role, actively working to spread the knowledge. Others were unconscious guardians, individuals who were living according to the principles of the prophecy without fully understanding the ancient lineage that they were part of. And she discovered something else. She discovered that the prophecy was not just about the awakening of the Dragon Queen in human consciousness, but about the awakening of the Dragon Queen in the earth itself, in the body of Gaia, in the consciousness of all life. She discovered that the transformation that was unfolding was not just a human transformation, but a planetary transformation, a cosmic transformation that would affect all beings and all dimensions of existence. In her final years, Serpent worked to synthesize all of the knowledge she had gathered to create a comprehensive teaching that would make the prophecy of the Dragon Queen accessible to modern practitioners. She wrote a final book that was intended to be her magnum opus, a complete guide to understanding and embodying the wisdom of the Serpent Sbilas in the modern world. When Serpent died, her work lived on. The books she had written continued to circulate, reaching people in every corner of the world. The seeds she had planted continued to grow. The prophecy of the Dragon Queen began to spread as more and more people awakened to the truth of what the Serpent Sbilas had preserved for so long. And in our own time, we are witnessing the fulfillment of the prophecy in unprecedented ways. We are seeing women rising to positions of power and influence. We are seeing the earth rising up to protect herself. We are seeing the suppressed feminine divine emerging in every aspect of human culture and consciousness. We are seeing the old patriarchal order crumbling and new forms of community and consciousness emerging in its place. The Serpent Sbilas are no longer hidden. The prophecy of the Dragon Queen is no longer secret. The knowledge that has been preserved for thousands of years is now being revealed to all who have eyes to see and ears to hear. And those who understand this prophecy, who are committed to its fulfillment, are being called to step forward, to become conscious guardians of the ancient wisdom, to help guide humanity through the remaining stages of awakening toward the complete fulfillment of the prophecy. The Serpent Sbilas have kept their watch for millennia, have preserved the knowledge through countless ages, have maintained the frequency of the Dragon Queen's consciousness even when it seemed as though all was lost. And now, in our own time, their work is bearing fruit. The prophecy is being fulfilled, the Dragon Queen is awakening, and those who are ready to receive the wisdom of the ancient guardians are being invited to join in the great work of transformation that is reshaping human consciousness and human civilization. The time of the Serpent Sbilas is now. The prophecy of the Dragon Queen is unfolding, and you are invited to become part of this ancient lineage, to claim your role as a guardian of the sacred knowledge, to help bring about the awakening that has been foretold since the very beginning of human consciousness. And if you like this story, you will definitely love the next one that's appearing on your screen. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel, leave your like, and activate the notifications. See you in the next one.